Davies from the Council of Single Mothers. We have some single mums that would like to share, and we have Chris Lee from the Social Alliance. I'd like to introduce you first to Kerry Davies.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Kerry Davies and I'm the project worker at the Council of Single Mothers and Their Children. I'm also a single mother of a 10-year-old girl, and I was directly affected by the government's cuts this year. I actually have a job. I put my daughter in childcare and went and got a degree and got a job well before the age of 6, which is when every single parent is required to start looking for work, regardless of the cuts to their income, which now come into place when their youngest child turns 8. Single parents with up to 3 children now receive $7 more a week than a single unemployed person. They also have all the care and responsibilities for their family and no chance of getting jobs that have predictable hours which allow them to do that work. It's very important work, caring for a family, and people can't survive or find jobs on such a ridiculously small amount of money a week. Unfortunately, the government's theory behind this was that it was going to make it fair. When the Howard government first introduced this legislation in 2006, it wasn't fair. Children who are 8 years old are not able to walk themselves home from school, look after themselves while their parents are working. The only really reliable, available care outside of school hours for children this age is between 3:30 and 6 in the afternoon. A lot of single mothers work as cleaners, they work in hospitality, and they do not have 9 to 5 Monday to Friday jobs that allow them to drop their children at school and pick them up afterwards and look after them properly. They have to work nights, they have to take shifts on a moment's notice because that's what real employment flexibility means. And that is just not possible when you are the only adult in a household who is providing for a family. We need the government to reverse these cuts, and the reason that we're here today outside Bill Shortens' office is because the Labor government extended these vicious and savage cuts to single parents on the 1st of January this year. And when Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister almost 2 weeks ago, one of the first things he said was that he would look into reversing those cuts. We haven't seen any action at all. So Kevin Rudd can say as much as he likes, but until he actually does something, there are so many children in Australia living in poverty at the moment because their parents cannot afford to work and look after them properly. When a marriage breaks down, women are generally responsible for looking after children. We also have rising numbers of men who are doing the same thing. When you are the only person who can look after their family financially and emotionally, there needs to be some sort of acceptance that every now and then there will be periods of unemployment because children may be sick and they may need you more than you can work. So we need proper childcare in this country. We need real jobs that have predictable hours, not casual employment for poor people who then can't look after their children. And we need an income support system that gives parents with up to 3 children more than only $7 a week above the standard single unemployment rate in this country. I think it's a given that even single people can't survive on Newstart. And Newstart allowance does not pay people enough to buy clothes, food, transport, all the things that are needed so that you can actually get work. We also don't subsidise childcare for single parents properly, even where it does exist. And childcare for single parents should be subsidised so that people can actually go and get a university degree, because a university degree is probably the only way you have any hope of getting a job that actually does have predictable hours that allow you to plan and look after your family properly. I'd like to thank everyone who's been walking past and stopping for a little bit of a listen, and anyone who is actually supporting us. We would really encourage people to write to their own local member or give them a call and meet with them. I have met with 2 federal Labor politicians in the last week, and I can say that I'm not as hopeful as I was when Kevin Rudd first opened his mouth 2 weeks ago. I think he was a lot of talk, and I think that we really need to keep this pressure on so that Australia's children actually all get a fair start. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Next I'd like to have Jessica.
Hi, I wasn't really planning on talking, but I just wanted to point out that the reason why we have such a small turnout today is because the group of people they've picked on with this legislation are possibly one of the most vulnerable groups, because we can't be seen to stand here and say, this doesn't work, we need help. A lot of single parents are dealing with custody cases, and if they're seen in public to say, we can't survive on Newstart, they can have their children taken away from them. We're also the people who are doing the most. We're working the hardest. I'm a single mother of a 2-year-old. I study full time. I do volunteer work, and I work 1 shift a week just to survive. It's very hard to find the time, so they've really picked a group of people who can't stand up for themselves. Or if we can, we simply don't have the time or the energy. So that's just what I wanted to say. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jessica. Now we'd like to listen to Diane, what she's got to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane, and I'm a single parent. And I just want to point out that Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd both were brought up by single parents who were on the pension, and therefore it shows that it does help people, particularly if you're educated. And you can't be educated, like my sons are in primary school and high school. I could not afford the books. I was lucky that I had support from the teachers, and they've given my kids books, but I could not afford to buy them books. I'm sure that Kevin and Anthony Albanese didn't suffer to that degree because schooling was free. Social welfare was more supportive. Since they've been in power, the Labor government, and also prior to that the Howard government, they have sabotaged the social welfare system, which is there to support people and to give them a better quality of life. There is no parent that wouldn't try and give their kid a better quality of life unless they had no alternative, which is how it is at the moment. Kids go without school, without shoes. There are kids sleeping in cars, and it's really hard for people to turn up here and say, I'm poor, I can't feed my kids, I can't put petrol in my car, I can't afford to get my car fixed. It's quite humiliating, but some of us are doing it because we have to come out and tell people what it's like. This country has regressed. We're meant to be doing better, with the stock market doing so well, but if that's the case, why is it that people are struggling? Just the average people are having a hard time getting a job. There are less jobs out there, and it's even harder now for single parents to get a job, because Mr. Shorten, when this came in, he didn't create jobs for during school hours into working with school holidays. So, it's all well and good to put people on Newstart and call people bludgers, but like I'm doing a diploma at TAFE in community development. Everyone here works or goes to university. It's those people that are welfare dependent. If you want to help them, you have to create a better social welfare system and support them. You can't turn your back on them. Putting people in poverty does not create a better quality of life for anyone. And everyone has to take into account that there are children in this situation, and you're penalising the kids. And that's shameful, and it's un-Australian. And I'd also like to talk about the fact that I used to be a heroin addict. I was in and out of jail, I was homeless, and I had to fight my way to get to where I am now. And the social welfare system didn't support me. I kicked doors down to get where I am.
I went to school, I've done voluntary work, I work on the soup van. I see the hopelessness for people, how it is out there, but it seems to be that no one cares as long as it doesn't affect them. And that's just appalling, because we're talking about children. We're talking about single parents that are doing the job of two people. And we don't get holidays, a lot of us are on our own, but we just do it because it has to be done. But when you feel like you're being attacked by the government, it's really, really hard to comprehend and not be angry. The Labor government pretends to represent the working poor, or the people like us. But you don't represent us. The Labor Party does not represent us. You do not represent the Battlers. You do not represent my family. You do not represent anyone here. And you should be ashamed of yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. I also have another Diane that would like to share her story as well.
Thank you. Here's something I prepared earlier. And I'm going to get a bit shaky. I've now been a principal carer on Newstart for well over 4 years. I'm angry, I'm tired, and I am upset. I'm angry that the Liberal Party implemented welfare to work reform in 2006. I'm more angry with the party who fought so hard against this social policy in 2006. Did Labor reverse welfare to work once elected? No. Does Labor care about our children? It certainly doesn't feel like it. I'm tired. I'm tired of defending myself and my children. And I'm tired. Sorry. And I'm tired of the spin. I'm tired of the labelling and the haters. I think maybe it's fear. How many others are now only one step away from being in this position? I'm upset. I'm upset that parenting is no longer socially acceptable. Parenting is unpaid work. I'm upset that parenting is now up there with being labelled as long-term unemployed. I have been working, I have been studying, and I have been volunteering, and I have been parenting my children. Why am I in a system that seeks to punish me for doing the right thing? Here are my suggestions for the politicians on how to balance the budget. Number 1, don't call them job search or employment agencies when there aren't the jobs available. Call a spade a spade. Call them compliance centres. Put some of that cash into job creation instead, please. Number 2, stop and reverse the rollout of income management. $47,000 to monitor each individual. It's just ridiculous. It's called the social inclusion agenda, which income management comes under. It was a brilliant concept. Stop ruining it with income management. Trust me, multinationals won't notice, but small business will thank you. That's for you, Mr. Shorten. Stop. Number 3, stop promising to halve homelessness and then increasing it with your welfare to work payments. Welfare to work, aka poverty for sole parent reforms. Save your money and reinstate parenting payments now. Number 4, let us set your performance measures before you give yourself a pay rise. How about we call a mutual obligation, shall we? To all our federal politicians, both elected and in opposition, I hope you are enjoying every single cent of your pay rise. We all know where you balance the budget and where you got that money from. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really good. As you can see and hear, this is an emotional issue. What's happened has affected a lot of families. And, you know, you've heard a lot of people's, well, started off with Julia. No, sorry, it started off with Howard and then with Julia.
Steady.
Okay, I'm just...
Steady.
someone else.
Upset.
Hello everyone, I'm a
I'm a grey-haired single mother of a 25-year-old who I was blessed to be raising my daughter when there was a lot more support for single parents. I feel very teary today hearing the stories. When Howard first introduced the first cutbacks to sole parents' pension, I cried as well when I heard it on the radio. I knew I was in the clear now. My daughter was well on her way. But I thought of all the single mothers to come who would be thinking, well, what jobs are available between 9:30 and 2:30? And I thought the only industry that would employ single mothers during those hours would be the sex industry. And I started thinking this is an untold story, but I believe that there's probably quite a few single mothers having been forced to work in the sex industry because of these drastic cuts to their payments. I was fortunate to be a sole parent when they had low interest loans to buy houses that the Victorian Labor government introduced. They no longer have these low interest loans. I only had to have $5,000 deposit to get a house. I was also given free education at the time. It's incredible that in this country, which is one of the richest countries of the world, and people's lives in general are getting better and better and more comfortable, and the people that are most needy seem to be getting poorer and poorer. And let's not forget that Australia is one of the 10 most expensive countries to live in the world. And therefore we should be providing more support, not less and less support. I'm pleased to see all these women with children here. Let's keep up the fight. It's a fight worth fighting for because it is morally right. And this government and the previous governments are morally wrong in cutting payments to single parents and their children.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to read my speech because I can't do it any other way. So here goes. Mr. Shorten, we commend you on making it possible to request flexible workplace arrangements for working Australian families, including single parents. Arrangements that have been expanded to parents returning to work after a period of parental leave, parents with school-aged children, workers with caring responsibilities, mature age workers, workers with disabilities, and those suffering family violence. Us single parents want to ensure that you provide adequate childcare facilities to meet our needs of work with flexible care provided for our children, including weekend care. You have stated that this government understands that now more than ever Australians juggle caring responsibilities and family commitments and the demands of work. This is even more of a juggle for single parents. We would appreciate parenting payment single reinstated for all sole parents so that we can continue to be parents as well as working, studying and carers. Our demand for flexible working conditions is that we are given the ability to work part-time so that we can be there for our children and have parenting payment single to top up our income so that we can have the full benefit of a full-time wage coming into our household, or for those struggling that they can afford to do so and still be able to support their children. Parenting payments have always been below the poverty line. There are 879,000 sole parents in households involving 2,363,000 people. 24% live below the poverty line. That is a lot of Australian citizens. So it doesn't make sense why our government would place families onto an even lower payment Newstart, which they say is good policy. You have also stated that... Excuse me. Sorry. Sorry. You have also stated that this government understands that... Oh, sorry.
Take a breath, take a breath, take a breath.
You've also stated that Labor has a common sense and modern plan for Australian workplaces, and this Labor government is determined to ensure Australians achieve a decent balance between work and family life. Single parents have the dual responsibility of both mum and dad in the household, so we are generally time poor from the start. When your government made the decision to move sole parents onto Newstart to encourage sole parents to take on full-time positions, obviously you weren't thinking of your comment on a healthy balance of work and family life. On June 28th, legislation passes to support more Australians into work. The changes allow us Australians on income support to be able to earn $100 a fortnight, up from 62 before our payment is reduced. Us sole parents that removed from parenting payments single have lost up to $135 a week from January 1st, and you have given us back only $19 a fortnight. Those that were affected the worst were already in the workforce, like myself. Some had to give up their jobs as they could no longer afford to get there. Where is the incentive to work for us affected in this way now? Those that were on Newstart from 2006 onwards didn't show that they were in the workforce any more than what they are now. So it was a policy that wasn't proven to even get people into the workforce. For the first time in Australia's history, the income-free area will be indexed by CPI from 1st of July 2015. Ensuring the real value of this reform is maintained over time. This income support will enable 800,000 Australians to earn $38 more. Why is this going to happen in 2 years from now? Every 6 months we are having increases to our food, utilities, childcare costs, petrol and many other expenses. This increase needs to happen now. The legislation also includes $39.7 million investment over the next 4 years to provide tens of thousands of single parents on Newstart allowance with extra help for training and studying by extending the access to the Pensioner Education Supplement, PES. PES is a supplement paid at a rate of $62 a fortnight or $31.20 per fortnight for a concessional study load. Mr. Shorten, can you please reinstate jet fees back to what they were? Or the Labor government, for that fact. According to the latest release of data from Household Income and Labour Dynamics in Australia, the Qld survey, Australia's average wealth increased between 2001 and 2010. Yet there was one group that missed out, which was a one-parent households. Child poverty rose from 20.8% to 24.1%. No one likes to discuss the issue of child poverty, dismissed as just another story for bleeding hearts. We are all better off, they all say, and we have a strong economy. So does this matter? The poor are collateral damage of market economies. Sorry. And besides, poverty is caused by poor personal choices, right? The public continues to hold politically mistaken beliefs about the poor as basically disreputable and lazy, when in fact the reality is totally different. Poverty brings about social exclusion, stressed parents, family fights, no transport to see friends, no money for school camps, sports, excursions, people feeling sad because there is no money to clothe their children or even be able to send them to birthday parties because they can't afford presents for their child to take with them. There is more mental illness, illegal drug use, child and adult obesity, violence, lower aspirations in teenagers, lower maths and literary scores, increased homicides, more conflicts between children and increased imprisonment. Poverty creates a dysfunctional society. Since 2000, the European Union has incorporated social policy into its central governance, while its 2020 plan focuses on reducing poverty and social exclusion. Yet, in Australia, our governments are full throttle in the opposite direction. The focus has been on the need to cure single parents of welfare dependency, to acquire job search skills and get a job. This focus on modifying the behaviour of people, as Eva Cox reminds us, ignores the mathematics about the jobs available. Where are the jobs? Where are the jobs for the single parents that are in school hours so that we can still be able to drop off our children and pick them up? The legislation forcing already poor sole parents onto Newstart has been criticised by two bipartisan Senate standing committees, as well as the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights and the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. Our government are also forcing many into controlled income management. How are these vulnerable parents supposed to learn to be self-sufficient with this idea of control? It's demeaning and it lowers their self-esteem. The scheme costs between $4,500 to $7,800 per person per year. This money could be better spent on drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs that not only educates parents on the dangers of drug and alcohol, but encourages them to make choices to give up these addictions through programs that can improve their self-worth, such as job skills, reading, maths and education. Or simply to reinstate parenting payments so these parents can afford to budget, as it's impossible to budget whilst living below the poverty line. State governments are now also introducing bedroom taxes. This bedroom tax has been proven to be a disaster in the UK. Even reports of suicide have been reported due to the harshness of this policy. Please don't bring another failed policy here to Australia. The housing crisis is not the fault of the poor. The rich have grown richer by exploiting the poor, and this bedroom tax is yet another attempt to reduce the welfare state. Public house building by the government could boost employment and ease the housing shortage. Communities will be cruelly broken up by the bedroom tax. The policy will force people to move away from areas where they have their roots and informal structures of support. It is not acceptable for our governments to avoid taking action to reduce poverty and social exclusion. Is Australia really happy to allow growing numbers of children to grow up in poverty? I doubt it. Our group and others like it will continue to be a voice for all single parents until the rights of welfare for our children and ourselves are restored. There is a lot of work to be done, but we are single parents and we know what work is. That's what we do every day. Woo!
Profits. You have the banks making huge profits. You have CEOs of these companies paying themselves $10 million a year and stuff like that. So to say that we can't afford proper pensions for sole parents is ridiculous. Both the Labor and Liberal governments, Labor government and the previous Liberal government, they both choose to act in the interest of the rich and big business and not in the interest of workers and the poor. So we need to tax the rich more heavily, tax big business more heavily, or better still, with the mining companies and the banks, nationalise them, bring them under public ownership and use the profits for the benefit of workers, students, the unemployed and sole parents. So, yeah, it's necessary to restore the sole parent pension to the people who've had it taken off them. But in addition, the sole parent pension can and should be greatly increased from what it was before. So that's Socialist Alliance policy. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, especially to people who stopped passing by to listen. We do have one more speaker. I'd like to introduce Nick Costello from Parenting Payment for Parents Not to Newstart.
It's not where I'm from, that doesn't matter. They're a good group too. No, I am just somebody who's been on Newstart for a while, and I'm very, very concerned about issues right across the board. What's recently happened to single parents is just another straw on the camel's back, and it's pretty nasty. So I've been invited here to say a few words about the bigger picture, and I'm here not just to speak for myself, but also for the countless hundreds of thousands of people on welfare who simply couldn't get here today because they're too busy treading water. And I've come here to give a message, with the single parents, to give a message to the government by Mr. Shorten. And I've thought about that. I've thought a lot about what that message should be. We could tell them that economists are concerned that employment is in decline, that manufacturing and the rural sector and even mining is in decline. But they know that. We could tell them that the game is rigged and that unemployment statistics are manipulated to paint a rosy picture, but they know that. We could tell them that the 1 million jobs they have supposedly created in the last 7 years are most probably short-term jobs that have been churned through the system many times and counted every time they are. But they know that. We could tell them that the vast majority of welfare recipients are not bludgers, but they know that. We could tell them that welfare dependency in Australia is partly due to a government decision made in 1975 to sign a document called the Lima Declaration, which helped to initiate the offshore flow of Australian investment capital. But they know that. We could tell them that the rising cost of living is causing hardship across the community. But they know. We could tell them that our artificially inflated housing industry is contributing to homelessness. But they know that too. We could tell them that the decision to force single parents onto Newstart allowance was morally bankrupt, but they know that. And we could tell them that their ongoing silence about these things feeds community prejudice aimed at welfare recipients, and they know that as well. But they won't say a word about any of these things because they are frightened. They are frightened that if the true extent of unemployment and poverty is revealed, Australians might lose confidence in the economy and stop spending and investing. And they're frightened that if this happens, our nation could face the greatest economic disaster since the Great Depression. Now, if the economic forecasts we have been hearing this week are any indication, such a crisis might be imminent. Yet our politicians don't seem to have noticed. Are they so preoccupied with petty squabbles and xenophobic distractions that the urgency has escaped them? Or could it be that the strategies they have relied on for decades have become a millstone around their necks? A great deal has happened in the last 4 decades, and we haven't really come to grips with much of it yet. Global industrial change is upon us, yet our collective understanding of its impacts remains unclear. We've kept our noses to the grindstone, reluctant to slow down for a minute to take stock in case we get left behind. But some of us have already been left behind, and now we find ourselves locked in a time warp. Australia's welfare system is an anachronism. Its logic belongs to an era when any able-bodied person who wanted a job could get one, but that time is over. In 1969, the entire social security caseload in Victoria's Western Port region was administered from 2 desks in an upstairs office above the Commonwealth Employment Service in Dandenong. Today, that same region contains many large Centrelink offices that employ hundreds of staff and service many thousands of people in need. Across the nation, Centrelink has become an empire in its own right, accounting for a huge proportion of government spending. During that same period, the government abdicated its responsibility for assistance to job search, dismantled the CES and set up the privatised job network, which now operates on an industrial scale, but with limited success. One of the things that seems not to have changed is that notions that employment is available to anybody who wants it, and the notion that that notion has influenced our approach to welfare. Newstart allowance is still provided as a subsistence income, bridging finance until a person finds a job. Yet for many, that job has not come and may never come. Nevertheless, politicians refuse to raise the level of Newstart or to restore single parents to a payment regime that is more appropriate to their circumstances. They are fixated on a crusade to impart the value of a work ethic onto people who they have deemed derelict in their duty for having become irrelevant in a changing industrial landscape. And what have they called the legislation they have enacted to move single parents onto a lower payment? It's called the Fair Incentives to Work Bill. But all it really has done is use public perceptions of a work ethic to introduce a punitive piece of legislation that is based more on prejudice than productivity. If you take the trouble to research the recent history of welfare politics in Australia, you will find a labyrinth of double talk and weasel words. A classic example of this can be found in comments made by Tony Abbott when he was asked if he thought we could ever eliminate poverty. He said, "We can't eliminate poverty because we can't stop people from drinking. We can't stop people from smoking. Using drugs. We can't stop people from gambling. We can't stop people from making mistakes." On another occasion, he said, "We can't stop people from being homeless if that's their choice." One thing he didn't do when he said Australia is in part a product of individual personal function, he didn't explain what the other part was. He didn't mention global industrial change, he didn't mention the casualisation of the workforce and many other things that cause people to be unemployed or in poverty. So, and at the time, what I found very, very interesting is that media had nothing to say about it. His parliamentary colleagues and opponents had nothing to say about it. And that is a very concerning thing, because if we're not going to talk about things on that level and gloss them over, we have some serious issues. So, what should my message to our political leaders be? Should I remind them that we all live in a sunburnt country and that disasters like drought, flood, fire and the downside of global industrial change go with the territory? Should I remind them that living in the lucky country does not give us permission to be complacent? Should I ask them what happened to the land of the fair go, or if the values I grew up believing in, truth, honour and justice, still mean something? Should I ask them what they might tell their grandchildren when questions arise about what happened here, when the Australian nation decided whether or not a sense of belonging and purpose was the right of every citizen? No, because these are questions they have probably asked themselves 100 times, because they are human as we are, and they fear, doubt, love and weep as we do. I know there's no point in appealing to their fiscal sensibilities, so I will speak to the fragile hearts they work so hard to hide from us. My message is simple. I've stood on the margins and I have felt the dragon's breath upon my face. And I have shared the heartbreak, the sense of abandonment and the tragedy of people who are trapped in social exile in their own country. And I have measured the width of the abyss that lies between them and the community they once called home. If your cupboard is really bare and you really have no extra money to share around, then give us dialogue. If the economy really is in trouble, allow us to carry our portion of the load rather than making us scapegoats for the actions of others. If our nation is to remain a democracy, then provide us all with the tools to make it work. Right now, it's hard to see where that's happening. But in this election, I will be voting for the candidate that does their best to make it work, to make it so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. We've now got a very brave little girl, Mara, and she's going to share her story.
Well, I'm part of a single parent family, and it's not easy being like a daughter. It's not fair. My mum has to get upset when I'm hungry, or school camp's on, or something like that, and she doesn't have money to pay for it. It's not her fault. She shouldn't have to be upset because I'm missing out on so much. It's a sole mum does 1,000 jobs. It's more than normal people do, especially with like they have a father or if single dads and they have a mother. He uses half those jobs, but when it's just her mum on her own with 2 kids, she has to do heaps of jobs. It's not fair.
Before everyone starts disappearing, the people who have spoken so far and who have got their speeches written down on paper, would it be possible if we could have a copy and take them over to Bill Shorten after we disband? If you haven't got an actual, if it's your only copy, we'll ask if we can photocopy your speeches at Bill Shorten's office. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for making the effort to come today. I want to thank the police for showing up and making sure that we don't run a riot, which we wouldn't. Just want to also thank the people that are passing by and thank you for listening to us. We just ask that you hear our stories and support us and let it be known to the federal members of Parliament that we are just wanting a little bit of a hand up, not a handout. Thank you.